we've begun operations to help save Iraqi civilians stranded on the mountain. As ISIL has marched across Iraq, it has waged a ruthless campaign against innocent Iraqis. And these terrorists have been especially barbaric towards religious minorities, including Christian and Yazidis, a small and ancient religious sect. Countless Iraqis have been displaced, and chilling reports describe ISIL militants rounding up families, conducting mass executions, and enslaving Yazidi women. In recent days, Yazidi women, men, and children from the area of Sinjar have fled for their lives. And thousands, perhaps tens of thousands, are now hiding high up on the mountain with little but the clothes on their backs. They're without food, they're without water, people are starving, and children are dying of thirst. Meanwhile, ISIL forces below have called for the systematic destruction of the entire Yazidi people, which would constitute genocide. So these innocent families are faced with a horrible choice: descend the mountain and be slaughtered, or stay and slowly die of thirst and hunger. Now, I've said before, the United States cannot and should not intervene every time there's a crisis in the world. So let me be clear about why we must act and act now. When we face a situation like we do on that mountain, with innocent people facing the prospect of violence on a horrific scale, when we have a mandate to help, in this case a request from the Iraqi government, and when we have the unique capabilities to help avert a massacre, then I believe the United States of America cannot turn a blind eye. We can act carefully and responsibly to prevent a potential act of genocide. That's what we're doing on that mountain. I've therefore authorized targeted airstrikes, if necessary, to help forces in Iraq as they fight to break the siege of Mount Sinjar and protect the civilians trapped there. Already, American aircraft have begun conducting humanitarian airdrops of food and water to help these desperate men, women, and children survive. Earlier this week, one Iraqi in the area cried to the world, "There is no one coming to help." Well, today America is coming to help. We're also consulting with other countries and the United Nations who have called for action to address this humanitarian crisis. I know that many of you are rightly concerned about any American military action in Iraq, even limited strikes like these. I understand that. I ran for this office in part to end our war in Iraq and welcome our troops home, and that's what we've done. As Commander-in-Chief, I will not allow the United States to be dragged into fighting another war in Iraq. And so even as we support Iraqis as they take the fight to these terrorists, American combat troops will not be returning to fight in Iraq, because there is no American military solution to the larger crisis in Iraq. The only lasting solution is reconciliation among Iraqi communities and stronger Iraqi security forces. However, we can and should support moderate forces who can bring stability to Iraq. So even as we carry out these two missions, we will continue to pursue a broader strategy that empowers Iraqis to confront this crisis. Iraqi leaders need to come together and forge a new government that represents the legitimate interests of all Iraqis, and that can fight back against the threats like ISIL. Iraqis have named a new president, a new Speaker of Parliament, and are seeking consensus on a new Prime Minister. This is the progress that needs to continue in order to reverse the momentum of the terrorists who prey on Iraq's divisions. Once Iraq has a new government, the United States will work with it and other countries in the region to provide increased support to deal with this humanitarian crisis and counterterrorism challenge. None of Iraq's neighbors have an interest in this terrible suffering or instability, and so we'll continue to work with our friends and allies to help refugees get the shelter and food and water they so desperately need, and to help Iraqis push back against ISIL. The several hundred American advisors that I ordered to Iraq will continue to assess what more we can do to help train, advise, and support Iraqi forces going forward. And just as I consulted Congress on the decisions I made today, we will continue to do so going forward. My fellow Americans, the world is confronted by many challenges, and while America has never been able to right every wrong, America has made the world a more secure and prosperous place. And our leadership is necessary to underwrite the global security and prosperity that our children and our grandchildren will depend on. We do so by adhering to a set of core principles. We do whatever is necessary to protect our people. We support our allies when they're in danger. We lead coalitions of countries to uphold international norms. And we strive to stay true to the fundamental values, the desire to live with basic freedom and dignity that is common to human beings wherever they are. That's why people all over the world look to the United States of America to lead. And that's why we do. So let me close by assuring you that there is no decision that I take more seriously than the use of military force. Over the last several years, we have brought the vast majority of our troops home from Iraq and Afghanistan, and I have been careful to resist calls to turn time and again to our military, because America has other tools in our arsenal than our military. We can also lead with the power of our diplomacy, our economy, and our ideals. But when the lives of American citizens are at risk, we will take action. That's my responsibility as Commander-in-Chief. And when many thousands of innocent civilians are faced with the danger of being wiped out, and we have the capacity to do something about it, we will take action. That is our responsibility as Americans. That's a hallmark of American leadership. That's who we are. So tonight, we give thanks to our men and women in uniform, especially our brave pilots and crews over Iraq, who are protecting our fellow Americans and saving the lives of so many men, women, and children that they will never meet. They represent American leadership at its best. As a nation, we should be proud of them and of our country's enduring commitment to uphold our own security and the dignity of our fellow human beings. God bless our armed forces, and God bless the United States of America.
U.S. President Barack Obama wrapping up his remarks, outlining his actions that he's authorized to deal with the crisis in Iraq. Jim Spellman's been monitoring this story all day. Let's check in with him in the newsroom. Jim?
Mike, President Obama there spoke about essentially the Obama doctrine, the Obama worldview of not getting involved whenever possible around the world. He ran for president against the Iraq war, and for him to have to make a speech like this tonight about Iraq, of all places in the world, after he resisted using military force in Syria, Libya, Egypt, Crimea, etc., to be right back in Iraq, a place that was such a difficult effort for the U.S. to wage under President Bush, and then later wrapping up under President Obama. You heard the president bring up two real issues with the progress that the Islamic State militants have been making. First are this group of ethnic and religious minorities that are on this mountain. He talked about the option that they're faced: descend from the mountain and be killed by the militants, or starve or die of dehydration there on the mountain. That's really the thing that is driving this humanitarian airdrops. We now know that at least the first mission of that has been completed, and those airplanes are back out of Iraqi airspace. The second is the city of Erbil. The United States has sent personnel there, essentially having a consulate, places that they just would not do that in other parts of the city, of the country, that is, including sending U.S. troops there that have been advising Iraqi and Kurdish troops as they try to battle the Islamic State militants. It's the progress towards that city that the president cited as really authorizing the military, the potential military airstrike aspect of this. But still, as the president and his spokespeople have said so often, no plans at this time for U.S. boots on the ground, combat troops to be on the ground there fighting these militants in Iraq, Mike.
And as he said, a mandate to help can't avert a massacre, cannot turn a blind eye to a potential massacre. The core principles when he was wrapping up: protect our people, and that of course gets to what you were talking about, Erbil, support our allies, and prevent a potential genocide. So he's really trying to make his case to the American people.
Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, the danger with this is that something that starts as a small engagement, advisors, a few airstrikes, could end up becoming something that becomes a much bigger involvement. That's long been one of the worries of the Obama administration at all of these hotspots around the world. You know, there was a point when there was potential military strikes against Syria over those chemical weapons attacks some months ago. And at sort of the last minute, the Russians came together with the Americans and others in the international community to come up with this plan to take away those chemical weapons. That was probably the closest the Obama administration has gotten to new military maneuvers in any of these kind of hotspots around the world. But it's such a different situation here, because these militants in ISIS, the leadership, they're not there to compromise. There's no real state actors that they can negotiate with, that they can work with, even if it's a less than ideal working situation. So that really is the fear with the administration, that what starts small becomes something bigger. And if that were to happen in, of all places, Iraq, there was really the trademark issue of President Obama when he was running for president. Had to be a very difficult choice for this administration to make, Mike.
All right, Jim Spellman from our newsroom, thanks so much.